Welcome into 5 Wide Fantasy. Today we're talking about 5 players that are plummeting down my fantasy football rankings now that training camps have opened for the 2023 NFL season. Guys, if you do enjoy today's video, be sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel as well. Help us get to 30,000 subscribers here on the YouTube channel. There's so many of you watching that are watching without being subscribed. If you've watched more than one of these videos of mine, please do drop a sub. Would really appreciate it. I've got 3 wide receivers and 2 tight ends for you guys today. A lot of this, again, similar to the previous video, we'll go off more of what I'm hearing from camp, what I'm reading, and then as well, we'll have a little bit of an analytical discussion on some of these players. But ultimately, there are a few different factors that go into why these guys have been moving in my rankings over the last couple of weeks now. But let's get to our first player. Starting with J.K. Dobbins of the Baltimore Ravens. He's currently going right now as the running back 19 near the end of the 4th round. And I think over the last couple of days, I've really started to think a lot more about this Ravens offense. But as well, with training camp opening, Dobbins is starting the year out on the PUP list and has not been practicing. Still dealing with his surgically repaired knee and having issues there. That's definitely a concern. Last year he managed to still be super efficient while looking like he was nowhere near himself. I mean, some of the videos of him just hobbling down the field on one leg while still managing to break big plays was incredible. So if at full health, I mean, Dobbins is a great player, no doubt about that. But Harbaugh's left things really murky. He won't really say when he will potentially be back, what the real issue or concern is. Then they went out and signed Melvin Gordon. That really brings me some pause as well, as we'll get to with another one of our players here. So I don't know what the situation is with Dobbins. I mean, he was a player that was pretty outspoken about, the potential of him or the running back position and where things are at financially, and then as well for him wanting an extension. Could it be a mix of things? Maybe, but starting out of the PUP means he's still battling some sort of injury. Now, like I mentioned with the offense, like we talked about yesterday, on Wednesday's video with Zay Flowers, is the offense is going to see significant changes with Todd Monken taking over. So Monken's last season calling plays in the NFL was with the Cleveland Browns in 2019, and they only ran the ball on 37% of plays. And then in 2018, it was even lower. He was with the Bucs, and they were throwing the ball on almost 70% of plays. That number from the 2019 season would rank 29th in the NFL, so it'd be a very high pass rate compared to the Ravens being at the top of the league, or right near the top of the league. I think they were 3rd last year at 50.2%. Now, I'm not sitting here telling you, the Ravens are going to throw the ball at one of the highest rates in the NFL. Absolutely not. I think they'll be more in the middle of the pack range, but this is going to be a significant decrease. And why is that important? Well, now you have a more balanced offense with a very extremely mobile, one of the best quarterbacks running the football in the league. Well, that means we're going to see less volume for J.K. Dobbins, and we're also going to see the potential of those red zone opportunities and those inside the 5 opportunities, those touchdowns going the way of Lamar Jackson instead of J.K. Dobbins. And of course, the other elephant in the room here is, hey, J.K. Dobbins has not played more than a 40% opportunity share in his career. That's what it was in his 2020 rookie season, which ranked 43rd amongst running backs. He was splitting time with Gus Edwards. We've seen with John Harbaugh in this team offensively, it's one that consistently sees some sort of share between the running backs. I still think J.K. Dobbins is a fantastic player, but the philosophy that this offense is, the philosophy that is moving the direction for this offense, the scheme with Todd Monken, you combine that with what the quarterback is that he's competing with for those valuable touchdowns. And I'm really worried. I really am. He's looking to me right now with these injury concerns being one of those players I'm really putting my foot down on as one you have to be avoiding this season. He's moving now into that RB24 range for me and outside of my top 20 pretty firmly. Next up, another running back, this one going as a top 12 back right now, Naji Harris. He's the RB12 going in the early parts of the 3rd round. The more I look into Naji Harris's 2022 season, the more questions I have is his capability of being an RB1 for an NFL team. As long as Matt Canada is also the offense coordinator here, it's hard to really want a piece of this offense. I was reading an article from The Athletic, just a hilarious title here I'm looking at. Steelers love Kenny Pickett, but will they open up the offense? Matt Canada says no. So they've talked very highly of Pickett and the way things have been moving offensively with him under center and how his offseason has looked. but they still don't want to put the ball in his hands as much. That's technically a good thing for Harris. We could see him running the football more, and that's exactly what Canada said in this article, was they expect and want to run the football, and as well they want to go to what they'd been doing the last 9 games of 2022, was when they were at their best. And Harris was good in that period. I mean, he was the RB7.5 PPR points per game from weeks 10 to 18, so that's good for Harris from a fantasy perspective. But I go and I look at the numbers, and I say to myself, Jaylen Warren is just a much better running back than Naji Harris in pretty much all facets. He averaged, during that time frame, he averaged 4.7 yards per carry compared to Harris's 4.1. He had a better yards after contact per touch. He had one less run of 15 plus yards. Meanwhile, he had 116 less carries than Harris, so he's far more explosive. And he had more receiving yards with less receptions and more than double him in yards per route run. In a season for Matt Canada when he's on his last year of his deal and needs to have a really good season for any chance to come back. Like, I can't believe Mike Tomlin decided to keep him around. I mean, Tomlin's not a guy that for himself is one that you like to question. He's had a number of wonderful seasons here in Pittsburgh and really elevated their floor year in and year out. But I don't think Matt Canada is back unless this offense is really, really good, and it has not been. It has been stale. It has been terrible, and if they want to run the ball more, I don't think that's going to lead to them being very efficient offensively, even though Harris managed to find fantasy success. But I think the more you see these two guys play, the more you could see Warren getting more opportunities because he's just been better. Like, I was looking, and sure, I think Harris getting more touches obviously would mean that there's probably some more typical, how would I frame this? He's probably running into getting some designed opportunities where it's more difficult to be efficient in. But I was looking into how many defenders are in the box. It was 6.6 for Harris, 6.4 for Warren on average in his touches. So it's not like, Harris was seeing much different opportunities by a significant degree. These guys are running behind the same offensive line. If Warren eats into Harris's touches, that makes Harris one of the least valuable players in my mind in this range. Like, I can't see him being a guy that can return on an RB12 ADP if he isn't getting volume, because he's not going to give you efficiency. And right now I'm very worried about him, and he's moving back more in my RB16 range as opposed to the RB12 where he's at right now. Guys like Joe Mixon and Aaron Jones, I'm definitely taking before him. Our final running back here, one with, honestly, it's weird to say this, but with a heavy heart. I really don't want to move Breece Hall down in my rankings. He's the RB11 right now, going in the early parts of the 3rd round. Man, when I watch, I was getting to go through some highlights from last season, watching some tape on Breece Hall because I was putting some of his clips into a TikTok video that I was putting out on our the 5 Wide TikTok account. And I'm like, wow, this guy was seriously incredible last season. He was the RB7 in fantasy points per game, uplifted an offense that was absolutely terrible from a quarterback perspective. But the elephant in the room here, starting the year out in the PUP list, not a surprise. I expected that. I mean, this is a guy coming off an ACL surgery, so I didn't expect him to be involved in training camp right off the bat. And we have a history. Again, it's hard to ignore the history of running backs coming back from ACL injuries. It's just not one where we've seen any fantasy success. I think Breece Hall is so talented that maybe he's the guy that turns this narrative around. But we saw a guy like Saquon really struggle in his return. And then the bigger concern for me, where I'm really surprised, is the Jets are, it's Thursday when I'm recording this. This is going out on Sunday. The Jets are hosting Dalvin Cook today for a visit, and it seems like they're very interested in bringing him in. And Robert Saleh is saying, this has nothing to do with Breece Hall and his health. I mean, it's just complete bullshit in my mind. If you think this guy's going to be ready to play, you have a guy like Michael Carter you spent early draft capital on. You saw Zonovan Knight last year put together some decent performances to be able to get you along here. And then they restructured Aaron Rodgers' contract. Does that mean they're going to bring in Dalvin Cook knowing that he does not want to come in on any sort of veteran low-level deal? He wants to be paid for his services. Is it all just screaming Dalvin Cook is signed, and maybe by the time you're watching this, he is signed? I just think that puts a ton of concern, and it puts the Jets in a spot if Cook comes in where, hey, we're going to ease him back. We're not going to rush this. Maybe they don't bring him back for the first few weeks of the season, or at least they try to ease his workload. And then I'm taking him as a top 12 guy that even if he is really good when he is on the field, I just don't know if I'm going to be able to get enough from him. So for right now, We'll definitely reconvene on this leading up to the season as we get a couple weeks out, as opposed to, more than a month out. We'll talk about this some more, but right now he's going more in that range that I talked about with Naji Harris, purely on this conservative injury. All right, now for a couple of wide receivers. First, a very obvious one that you've probably heard about before. It's Treylon Burks of the Tennessee Titans. The signing of DeAndre Hopkins pretty much makes Treylon Burks an undraftable guy for me. This is an offense that's consistently running the ball at a top 5 rate, always around 50%. They've done that for the last 5 seasons in a row now. Basically, as long as Derrick Henry's running the football, this is what this team is going to do, and I can't blame them for that. And they ranked 31st in plays per game last season. So they're running the ball a lot, and they're also pretty slow when it comes to the offense in terms of using the play clock, trying to control the game. They're not going to run a lot of plays, and that's just a recipe for disaster for volume for any wide receiver. So you look at this team offensively as well. I've seen so many people on Twitter kind of saying, hey, you're not paying attention to how good Ryan Tannehill was or Ryan Tannehill's been the last number of years. He's been a crazy efficient quarterback. Listen, all the respect in the world for Ryan Tannehill. I think he's definitely in that above average to average quarterback in the league. I don't have anything to say about Ryan Tannehill. He's a terrible quarterback. He can't support quality wide receivers. The real concern here is the offensive line is absolutely atrocious. The worst in the league. PFF has them ranked as the worst in the league heading into this season. Tannehill was bottom 10 amongst quarterbacks in pressure rate. He was under pressure quite a bit. He actually was pretty solid under pressure too. But this team had the worst pass blocking grade in the league last season. They had the 4th highest sack rate. So everything here points to this team struggling if they want to drop back and throw the football, which definitely won't be happening at a high rate. And then I look at, like I mentioned, with DeAndre Hopkins being added, this puts Treylon Burks in that wide receiver 2 role. The ceiling for a wide receiver 2 in the Tennessee Titans offense, so for as long as Derrick Henry's been running the football for them, is 2020 Corey Davis. He finished as wide receiver 31, a pretty solid season, and had 92 targets on the year. So pretty good year. Again, this is the ceiling with a team that was much, much better than the one that Tennessee, I think, is going to be this season. But Treylon Burks is being drafted right now as the wide receiver 36. I would expect closer to the season this will be moving significantly into that, that wide receiver 40-something range. But to me, he's more of a wide receiver 50. He's not a player that has a ton of upside. He's going to be reliant on injury to even be able to be successful. And we saw last season, I know it was as a rookie, that even with the opportunity of a barren wide receiver corps, he still wasn't able to take advantage. So I love Treylon Burks as a player, but this is not the season that I'm going to be investing in him for as long as the offensive line looks like this and for as long as DeAndre Hopkins is around in Tennessee. Finally, a more high-profile wide receiver here for you guys. It is DK Metcalf of the Seattle Seahawks. He's currently going as the wide receiver 15 at the end of the 3rd round. Now, he's being drafted ahead of his finish last season. He finished as the wide receiver 18 and was the wide receiver 22 in the second half of the year, where the Seahawks weren't quite as good offensively as they were in the beginning part of last season. But what really has me a bit concerned is the Seahawks lose their quarterback's coach. He left to go join the Tampa Bay as their offensive coordinator, and he really lifted Geno Smith to a level that we've never seen in the NFL. So I do think with him gone, they will go back to running the football a fair bit more. And then as well, we see Zach Charbonnet being drafted as a fairly early pick as a running back. And then, of course, Jackson Smith and Jigba to fill certain roles. Like the Seahawks want to be better with their backs from that receiving perspective. Kenneth Walker wasn't great last year. That's not really his game whatsoever. Charbonnet was great at UCLA as a pass catcher, filling that role there. And they wanted to get a better, more talented guy to fill in as that wide receiver 3. Now, JSN could potentially be that wide receiver 2 ahead of Tyler Lockett, but at the very least have 3 really solid wide receiver options for Geno Smith to ensure that his play stays at that high level. Now, it wasn't great closing out the season in the last 5 games. He was 28th in yards per attempt. He was 24th in completion percentage, and he was 36th in turnover-worthy play rate. So that might have Pete Carroll a little concerned, that turnover-worthy play rate, to say, hey, we want to use, now that we've added Zach Charbonnet as well, we want to use this 2-headed monster on the ground and run the ball, establish the run, and use the run to be able to open up the pass and the explosive plays, which DK Metcalf is plenty capable of doing. Love DK Metcalf as a talent. I still think he's going to be a valuable player in fantasy football. I just don't want to draft a guy in this area of the draft in that 310 or as a top 15 guy if I don't see a way that this guy finishes top 15. And to me, I'm worried he hit his ceiling last year. He led the NFL in end zone targets with 22. was basically was by far their most reliant guy, and this was by a really significant margin. Now, do they look to run the ball a little bit more in the red zone and inside the 10, inside the 5? Does Jackson Smith and Jigba eat into these opportunities? He also was 7th in targets last season, and that's a big one for me. Like, he's an explosive, he can create explosive plays. He has the potential to score some touchdowns, but I'm worried the volume won't stay the same with JSN stepping in. By no means is this a do not draft DK Metcalf, but he is someone that I'm starting to become a little bit more worried about as we come into the training camp to see if he can really maintain that player that's in the conversation of being a wide receiver 1. I don't think that can be the case this season. All right, those are some players moving down in my fantasy football rankings heading into the 2023 season. Training camp is open. There's a ton of news to get to, guys. Be sure to follow along here. Like the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel as well. We'll be posting stuff on our shorts feed. We are every day, and as well on the 5 Wide TikTok, so be sure to follow us there. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we will see you on the next one.